We need teachers. Bottom line, we need teachers. Hi, I'm Chuck. I'm an educator with a new job this year, a new commute, and this new podcast. This is Drive Time Diaries. Thank you for driving along shotgun today with me. And great news coming out of Illinois today. That's what I'm going to talk about. Just heard on the news just now. What's today? November 13th in the morning. Illinois just reported that employment of teachers went up in the last 4 years or so, I think. Went up 16%, which is fantastic news. If you read, all the news that I've been hearing, articles I've been reading in the Union magazine, things that I've been seeing on blogs, other news that I've been hearing on just regular media sources, all say that we are down teachers, and the openings that exist would speak to that also. At the school that I was at last year, my position is still technically open, my math position. And also, I just spoke to a PE teacher that also left last year. Spoke to her the other day, and her position is also still open. This was the number 2 middle school in the state. Fantastic school, and even fantastic school, gifted population, just wonderful things going on there. Even they cannot fill positions. So obviously there's a drastic teacher shortage, and in the STEM fields that's been true for a long time. That's part of my story, is how I became a math teacher in the first place. I went to the University of Missouri to go be a social studies teacher, and although I was deeply passionate about it, really into it, scored very well on my certification test, none of that mattered. For whatever reason, I couldn't even get interviews. I was making calls to every single opening that existed in the hardest of schools, hardest of teaching situations, just trying to get my foot in the door somewhere, and I couldn't even get calls back for those social studies positions. And so at that point in 2007, I think, I went ahead and added on middle school science and middle school math certifications by taking those tests, and that's what ultimately got me into my first classroom, because the need was so great there. I was so much more marketable as a math or science teacher. So we need teachers. So the fact that Illinois is up 16% employment after COVID, after all the craziness going on in schools the last 2 years, that's fantastic. And maybe they were up even more before COVID or so. Maybe that's why they said the last 4 years, because that would kind of tag on 2019. Maybe they were up dramatically in 2019, and they've actually had some losses since 2020. But regardless, we should look into what Illinois is doing. And I would, without having to be able to research this, because rules of the Drive Time Diary is usually I'm driving doing this, so I'm doing this right now on the way to work, so I cannot research this on my phone right now, but I would bet that part of that increase has to do with alternative certification programs. And from teachers that I talk to, alternative certification programs are a pretty polarizing subject, because a lot of it comes down to personal what about me feelings. This is what you have to do, most people, to get into teaching without going to school for a very long time. You have to decide when you're like 17, 18-year-old that teaching might be for you. And then you enroll into college and you start those classes. Your child development is your first class. You learn about psychology of learning and development of kids, learning philosophies like constructivist, other ones I can't remember. Constructivist is in my head right now because my sister just brought that up in the episode 140 that I interviewed her in. And so you learn that stuff, and then your sophomore year you start doing observations in schools. That's part of all the stuff you have to do to be able to get through university with your teaching degree, your education degree. And you have to set aside an entire semester where all you do is go and be a student teacher. If you've been in a public school, I'm sure you've seen that. I think sometimes private schools get student teachers also if they come from like religious institutions. And so you have two choices when you're a student teacher. Hope that you can get through without really working and make it through that whole semester on your parents' support, some other kind of family support, or loans and going into debt, or essentially work two full-time jobs. The full-time job where you play teacher during the day, and then as much as you can work in the evenings and on the weekends if you're having to support yourself. That's a lot to ask of individuals, and it's a lot to ask of anyone that has any responsibilities. You're really funneling down who can really go through that path to anyone who has familial support or a nonstop motor that can burn themselves dry for at least that semester, and people who don't have to worry about childcare or other family responsibilities. If you were having to care for a kid or a sick family member or just elderly parents, that would be really hard to do during student teaching if you had to work also. And so that system obviously worked for public schools for, I don't know, a century. A lot of state colleges started just as teacher colleges, and then they grew out their programs from there. But having mostly young women go to state colleges to get their teaching certificates worked for the country for a very long time. But I think the numbers stay now that that's not working. So I know over my whole career, alternative certification programs have existed and they've been growing, but it's still something that is shunned by the typical classroom teacher because there's a feeling, a zeitgeist, that if you did not go through those 4 years of undergrad and then that and all the observations and time in classrooms during that time and then the semester of student teaching, that you're just not going to be as prepared for the classroom. And that might be true, but there's differing levels of preparedness for the classroom, even just between universities. I've seen student teachers in my department from several different universities, just even in the St. Louis area, and not every teacher development program, even the traditional path, is equal. So we already have varying degrees of preparedness for the classroom. But what people who down alternative certification programs forget is being able to get a whole adult in that classroom. I think now that I'm a whole adult and 40 years old, I think that means something. I think there's a difference between a 22, 23-year-old new teacher and what they can deal with and how they can interact with parents, and a 30-year-old new teacher, 35, 40-year-old. This is their second career. People that have had that real work responsibility, I think that they have the ability to step into a different working situation a little bit quicker than someone who teaching is their only and first job. And so, good job to Illinois for increasing your teaching employment I think that we all need to do that, and so it's time to, if you're still a person who is down on alternative certification, it's time to look into that. We need people who want to do the job to be able to get into the job, and we need to make it as easy as possible. We're not in a position in the education, I'll call it an industry because people make money on it. We're not in a position in the education industry field to be gatekeepers that are making it harder than it needs to be. I hesitated just then because we do need to be gatekeepers, because we need to make sure that these people are safe for our children. Excuse me. But that's where a background check comes in, okay? That's where some vetting process is important, and background checks are deeply important, and mentoring and maybe even longer periods of probationary employment instead of going straight to tenure is also something that we could look at. But gatekeeping to say that if you want to be a teacher, you have to go through this 3-year long process. We're not in a position where we can do that. I have a friend who is, he went to school as an engineer. He worked for Boeing. He is super smart. He just kind of felt like he didn't want to be an engineer anymore. And so he reached out to me a few years ago and he said, hey, I'm kind of looking at going into teaching. Do you have anybody that might need tutoring in your classroom? And I did at that moment. It was like ordained by God. It was cool. I had a kid who needed tutoring. My friend wanted to tutor and see what feeling like a teacher might even look like for him. And so I was able to join up that student and her family with my friend as a tutor, and he donated his hours even. I don't think they ever paid him. And it was a incredibly successful semester for that student, even to the point where they wanted to work together the next semester too. And so that kind of experience right there, to be able to get into a teaching situation and try it on, that's the kind of thing that we need to cultivate and deepen. And I, as working as a tutor and interviewing tutors also in the evening hours, I know that a lot of the people that I interview are, I think, feeling the same way as my friend did. They want to get into a teaching scenario, but don't really know how to. So they start as a tutor because they often kind of did some tutoring at the student center where they were in college, or they're used to being really strong students, and maybe they helped their classmates with calculus a lot, or physics, that kind of thing. And so those kind of people, we need to give them opportunities to get into a classroom and really try it on, because we need the bodies. So let me know what you think about alternative certification, especially if you're an educator who went a little more the traditional route like I did. What do you think about that? Is that, quote, fair that someone might not have the same path to certification that you did, but they could get the same salary? I'm kind of alternatively certified in math also, and here I am. This is my 16th year teaching. I think it's quite arguably objectively true that I'm a good math teacher, but I didn't go to Mizzou to be a math teacher. I missed out on all those little math teacher classes, but here I am. So I don't know, what do you think about that? Share your thoughts with me. You can do a voice message on Spotify. You can find me at the X at Chuck C. Baker. You can send me an Instagram message at Drive Time Diary, or at Mr. C. Baker for Math, or as always, you can text me or see me in person, and I would love to hear what you have to say. I'm almost at school now, ready for a great day. Thank you for riding shotgun today. We'll see you on the next drive. Stay safe.